Hi YouTube, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Dani and I make vlogs about all things that I'm passionate about, which include travel, aviation, feminine energy, and the law of attraction predominantly. Today is a video from my podcast. So a few weeks ago I recorded a podcast on vision boards and I recorded it on my camera so that I could use that footage for YouTube, and I'm going to do the same thing today. I'm recording a podcast on the Rose Lineage, which is a sacred and ancient lineage of feminine wisdom, which I'm going to talk about in today's episode. So if you are on a feminine path, if you do want to explore the divine feminine or the goddess or the ancient wisdom that has been lost over the ages, then this episode is for you. So I really hope you enjoy it. If you want to check out more goddess content, I do have a podcast called Thank Goddess. I'm going to link it below so you can check out the other episodes which may be of interest to you. They're streamed on all the podcasting platforms, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and whichever other podcast platforms you're listening on, you'll be able to find my podcast Thank Goddess. And I have a lot more content very similar to what I'm speaking about today, which is a big topic and it's not for everyone. So if you're here and you're watching this and you're really receiving this message that I'm about to speak about on today's episode, then trust that there is a reason for that, and it is very likely that you are a part of the Rose lineage and this message is for you, because there are many souls on the planet right now that are doing this work and are walking the path of the Rose, which I'll speak about in today's episode. So without further ado, here is my podcast episode on the Rose lineage, what it is, how to work with this frequency, and essentially why this is so important. What you're listening to now is the 33rd episode of the Thank Goddess podcast, and I'm so excited for the topic of today's conversation. It's a big topic, I'm not gonna lie. It is a really big topic, and I almost feel a little bit nervous to be speaking about it. It was similar to an episode I recorded previously on Mary Magdalene, and it's such a big topic to unpack. I'm just like, where do I even start? And I don't even know if I'm the right person to be able to even be speaking on this topic, because I feel like there's just so much, and I'm even early on my journey on unraveling so much of this. So I'm like, am I the right person to speak about this? But at the same time, I do feel, I'm very intuitive, and I feel that this information needs to be had on the podcast. It needs to be brought to the podcast right now, and maybe we can have more conversations about it in future. I hope we do, and go deeper on it, because this topic has many layers, and like I said, I'm not an expert. Like I'll put the disclaimer out right now, like I am on this path that I'm about to speak of, which is the path of the Rose. We're going to be speaking about the Rose lineage, what that is, what does that mean. And I, as a disclaimer, like I am early on this path. I am early on this journey for myself. So last year, and I've discussed this in my Mary Magdalene episode, and that's actually a really great episode to go back and listen to give you a little bit of I guess context for this conversation or where it derives from. But essentially last year I did a retreat with Mary Magdalene in the south of France, and I was initiated into the Rose lineage, and I wear this red thread on my wrist, which is really funny because so many people ask me about this red thread, and a lot of people think it's a cultural thing. I don't know, maybe there is other reasons for wearing the red thread, but as far as I know, the red thread is kind of a symbol of the Rose lineage, or the feminine the feminine wisdom that has been lost in our society at large. However, the thread has continued to weave itself throughout many generations, through many different ancestral lines and different goddesses, and we are all one, we are all connected, we all come from the same cosmic womb of creation. And essentially that's what I feel the red thread represents. But I won't get into that too much today. I really want to speak about the Rose lineage and the significance of the rose, the symbolism of the rose and what that means. And this path for me, it feels very, very aligned. It feels very much what my soul came to planet Earth at this time to do. And there's so many of us doing this work. You know, you often hear these phrases like rise of the feminine, and a lot of women are becoming conscious of the wisdom that has been kept from us, the true power of being female, because we live in this man's world, and a lot of it has to do with the patriarchy and this conditioning that we've received for so many centuries that a woman is less than, and that, you know, women should aspire to be like men or to act like men. And these teachings of the rose are really about the power of the feminine energy. And when I speak about the feminine, I'm not talking about women as such, although a lot of women have incarnated as women to truly experience the feminine energy, because I would say that most people that are born female with female reproductive organs, you will tend to have more feminine energy than masculine energy. And that's not everyone, of course. There's always going to be exceptions. I don't like to generalize. A lot of women that have been incarnated at this time have done so to heal the feminine energy and to embody that fully and to express it in its healthy form. And I truly believe if you're listening to this conversation, if you've gravitated towards learning about the Rose lineage, then chances are you're probably a part of it. There is some remembrance. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is a remembrance. It's a remembrance. These ancient codes, this ancient wisdom. It's a remembering. It's the remembering of the true power of the feminine, and it lives within our bodies. It's a cellular memory, and a lot of these codes are getting activated in our DNA. And I hope I'm not losing too many people at the moment, but we're really in this transitional time on planet Earth, and we're seeing a lot more feminine energy, like they say, rising or coming. It's surfacing, this ancient feminine wisdom. And we need that, not to live in a matriarchy, not so women can be above men, but so that we can restore the balance on planet Earth. Because for many, many centuries, we have been living in a patriarchy. We have been living in a hyper-masculine society. And that is not to say it's a man's society, but we've adopted the qualities of the masculine energy, and we have prioritized them as higher value than the feminine traits and characteristics. And what we need to see happen is that the masculine and feminine need to come into harmony. They need to be imbalanced. And that is how we will heal the earth. We will be able to heal all this like climate change that we're seeing on the planet. We'll also be able to heal ourselves and the imbalance that we have within ourselves, which is why I believe so many people are getting sick and autoimmune diseases are rising in our society. And why is that? Because we are out of balance energetically, and all physical illnesses result and stem from an energetic imbalance, which affects us mentally, emotionally, and physically. Everything is related. I mentioned it before, but there are a lot of women that have incarnated on the planet. Not just women, there are men as well, but there are a lot of women that have come at this time, because this is the time of the feminine. This is the time, finally. This is really what so many women have died for in the past, that have fought for in the past, for this very time, because this time is so pivotal in our history, or not in our history, in our future, for our future. This is the time for the feminine to rise. And as I mentioned before, this is not about women being on top of men. This is about really working with the feminine, bringing that energy forward through us. It always starts with self, so that we can extend it to others and the world at large, and heal what needs healing in our world, because the feminine energy is healing energy. We heal the masculine through the feminine. There is no other way around it. The feminine is healing. And the more of us that can embrace the divine feminine and the teachings of the divine feminine and heal our own feminine energy and walk this path that I'm going to speak about on today's podcast, I truly believe this is how we will create a new world, a new earth. The planets, believe it or not, have their own consciousness. Like we have a consciousness, right? But did you know that Mother Earth has her own consciousness? And Mother Earth, Gaia, she is going through this transitioning phase at the moment. Her consciousness is shifting. You might have heard this new earth that we're birthing at the moment, and essentially what's happening is we're moving from a 3D consciousness to 5D consciousness. And so what does that mean? Well, I mean, maybe none of us have the answers because none of us can really tell the future, right? But essentially 5D consciousness is an ascension. And so I see us moving from scarcity, from lack, from separation, that's a big word, moving from separation consciousness to unity consciousness, where we remember that we are all one. We all come from the same source. It doesn't matter about my skin color, your skin color, if you are born in this part of the world and I'm born in this part of the world, if I am a female and you are a male, if you believe in this and I believe in this and we have these different values, we are all the same. We are all one, we are all connected. And when we judge others, when we hate upon others, when we don't accept others as they are, we in turn, because we are all one, we're judging ourselves, we're hating on ourselves, we're not accepting ourselves. And this is a huge wound in humanity at the moment. Huge, because most people are in judgment, are in separation. And that gets us nowhere. What we're seeing in the world is a byproduct of judgment and non-acceptance. And where is that getting us? Where is that getting us in society? More wars, more destruction of the environment, more consumerism, more capitalism. Like, where is this getting us? Don't you think it's time for a change? And this is what the Rose Lineage can bring forth. The more of us that walk this path, this is how we can truly see change in the world. And I'm going to talk about that in this episode. We're also, as we move to 5D consciousness, as I mentioned before, we're moving, the feminine energy is rising on the planet because that energy is going to restore the earth from all the damage that has been done within humanity and on the earth itself. We really need to see a rise of the feminine, because the feminine is really about love. It's about nurturing. It's about acceptance. It's about caring for others. It's about unity consciousness. It's about caring not just for other humans, but for animals, for plants, for the environment, you know, all of these things, and remembering that we are all part of this larger ecosystem. And that is something that is so lost at the moment in this need for more and more high rises and more things that we don't really need, more clothes, fast fashion, you name it. Like, we've gone too far. And again, there's no judgment here, but what we're going to see is a change, a shift in consciousness, and we're moving in a new direction now. So you either like jump on board and move with the times, or you're going to be basically swimming upstream with this new energy that's coming into the planet right now. You know, we've seen the planet so imbalanced for such a long time, and you know, when I speak about the imbalance, it's more so to do with the energies rather than women and men. However, as above, so below. So everything that we see on an energetic level from a larger perspective also manifests in like a tangible level. So the suppression and oppression and repression of women on the planet is a byproduct of the imbalance between the masculine and feminine energies, and a lot of that exists within all of us, including women. Like, we have our own internalized patriarchy, which I've spoken about in previous episodes, that we need to unravel. This is within the collective consciousness. We as a collective are imbalanced, and it's time for the feminine to rise, to take up more space, to remember her worth and her power. And this is an exciting time, particularly those of us that are doing this work. So essentially, the Rose Lineage, for those of you wondering what is the Rose Lineage, from my perspective, it is the path of the goddess. It is the path of the divine feminine. Okay, and I think there are many avenues that we can go to reach God or source, universe, whatever, to connect to our monad, to higher source, whatever you want to call it. And there are many ways that you can do that, and none of them are right or wrong. I'm not saying that the rose path is the way, but for me, it feels very much what I'm here to do in this lifetime. And it feels like I've done it in previous lifetimes. I've been an embodiment of the Rose teachings. I've embodied the Rose teachings for previous lifetimes. It feels more like a remembering. As I was saying before, a lot of this is like a remembering. A lot of us have actually walked the path of the Rose in previous lifetimes, and we've made sacred contracts and agreements to incarnate at this time to bring this wisdom forward as the feminine consciousness rises on the planet. The feminine way to God, and I've spoke about it in that Mary Magdalene episode, is really a way of the heart. And that is what the rose symbolizes. It's the heart. It's being in your heart and leading from the heart. And when we work with the rose, we are working with the frequency of the heart. It's really a way of love, is essentially what I'm saying. And I think it's really important to understand that the Rose Lineage is not something outside of us. It is actually something within us. It's not external. It is a path from within. And that is very feminine, because the masculine is very external, right? Whereas the feminine is very inward. So it's an inward journey. And the Rose Lineage, essentially what I believe, it's like a template that lives in our body. It's in our DNA, it's in our blood, it's in our cellular memory. It's basically a frequency of the feminine, and it consists of teachings and ancient wisdom and secrets and codexes and sacred geometry and things that have been kept hidden until this time, because now it is safe for this wisdom, this knowledge to be revealed to us. So we can start embodying this and walking the walk and bringing this wisdom forward so that we can heal and integrate and move towards a new earth. You know, for many years, and you know, I spoke about this in another episode on the witch hunts. That's a really prime example of when it wasn't safe for women to be in their power. For a long time, it hasn't been safe for women to be in their power, for women to claim their magic, their full sovereignty. It hasn't been safe. Women have been killed horrendously for many years. And this is why we're living in these times now where this is the most safe that it's ever been for women to stand in their power. We have more rights than we ever had since patriarchy came into existence, and we have the freedom now to stand up and show the world a different way of being, without the fear of being killed, without the fear of being burnt, without the fear of being ridiculed, without the fear of being tortured, even though that fear still lives deep within us. And there is a lot of healing to be done when it comes to women expressing and being seen and standing up for what they believe in. And, you know, we have every right to feel afraid because we have been hurt very deeply by the masculine for many centuries. And this is not an attack on men. This is not to say men are bad, but this is what has happened for a long time in history. And it is symbolic, I guess, or like a physical representation of what we have done to the feminine part of our consciousness. You know, all of us have masculine and feminine energy, and a lot of us, we push our feminine energy down because we don't believe that it is as valuable as our masculine energy. And as I always say, as above, so below. Anything that's within us is without us. So everything exists on a micro level and a macro level. So if we are suppressing the feminine within ourselves, then what do you think we're going to see in our world at large? We see the masculine suppressing the feminine and oppressing the feminine. And a lot of this has been the conditioning of patriarchy, which has really just got inside our psyches and twisted and distorted and conditioned us to think so less of our feminine energy. And the truth of the feminine energy, it is so freaking powerful, and we're going to heal, we're going to change the world with it. You know, one thing I've come to know on my spiritual journey is that love is the most powerful frequency that there is. You can't get higher than love. And the feminine path is love. It is working with the frequency of the heart. And the heart, what I'm going to explain a bit later, is the most magnetic part of ourselves. It is so powerful. And so the more of us that can open our hearts and lead from this place, we are going to do serious, amazing, just out of this world things that might seem illogical to our rational thinking mind. We live in a very logical society where we always value rationality above irrationality. And the heart, when you really connect to the frequency of the heart, it's not logical. There's no logic to the heart, but it makes sense. So maybe you're thinking, how do we start to, I guess, awaken these codes or start to remember this ancient wisdom? Because like I said, it's like the Rose Lineage, it exists within us. It's in our cellular memory. So you know what it is, what I believe, it's listening to podcasts like this. It's starting to work with the goddesses, whoever you feel called to work with. You know, it's starting to question the conditionings that we've received, particularly as women, particularly around like our wombs and our menstrual blood and our sexuality. There's so much power there. Everything that we've been told is a taboo. There's actually so much power. That is really where we need to start going. Everything that you have been told is a taboo is exactly where we need to start. We need to start unraveling and finding the mysteries in these things that have been labeled bad or wrong or taboo or slutty or you're a whore or you're a bitch or whatever the thing. You know, this is usually leading us to the treasure is what I'm finding. Look where they don't want you to look. That's what I'm finding. That's where the treasure is. You know, it's really exploring like that, the witch within us, you know, the going to the non-physical things, the teachings, exploring the feminine mysteries, the blood magic, the womb magic, all of these things. There's so much power and wisdom there. And the body remembers. The body has its own intelligence. It remembers things that the mind cannot, that our ego cannot remember, because obviously it's an ego, but our soul incarnates lifetime after lifetime. So there is, particularly, as I said, a lot of you listening to this, you would have probably, maybe you trained in an ancient priestess lineage, you know, in Egypt, or maybe you worked with Mary Magdalene in a lifetime. And this conversation, these type of conversations, the feminine, the divine feminine, this will be calling you. Trust me. If you're, like I said, if you're listening to these conversations, chances are this is for you, because this is not a conversation that most people are listening to. And then when you start to get inquisitive and start softening into those areas, start healing any shame you might have, you know, starting to look into why you resist certain things about yourself. Maybe it's your menstrual blood, and you start looking into that and healing your relationship with your period or your womb or whatever the thing. You start to unlock the sacred codes of the feminine. And you do that through the frequency of your body. your body starts, without you even realizing, it starts shifting and changing. And this happens like within your DNA, within your DNA structure and within your blood, and you start to activate the goddess within you, or these divine feminine energy codes, these Rose Lineage codes and transmissions. They start awakening in you. And once you get the ball rolling, is what I'm finding, it's like more and more and more will open up to you. Like I said, it's a big, not just topic, but it's like, there's so much wisdom here that I feel like I'm just like on the first layer. Like there are so many layers, and that is so feminine, because it's like the more you go into something, the deeper you can dive into it. Like there's no end to the wisdom that's been hidden. Like there's just so much there that you can unlock for yourself. And it's going to be different for everyone. You know, everyone's going to go on their own personal journey. So follow what feels right to you. Maybe it's listening to this podcast. Maybe it's joining a woman's circle. Sisterhood is really important when it comes to the Rose Lineage. A lot of the feminine work is in partnership, it's in sisterhood, it's in collaboration. That is the way of the feminine. We've lived in a masculine society for so long, which has told us that being independent and, you know, doing things on your own and getting on top of people is really great, and you should be commended for that, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But the feminine way is really about harmony and working together, and the more of us that come together that share the same horizon, the same vision, the more we can actually do good in this world. So sisterhood, joining a woman's circle, that is one way to unlock these codes. It's huge, you know, when we gather in a circle with, you know, usually a circle you need like 5 women, we actually, without even realizing, we tap into this feminine consciousness, and we start activating things that we don't know we're even activating a lot of the time, unless you're really sensitive to energies. But things start to shift, and we start creating a new world. We start contributing to the collective consciousness. We start activating these divine feminine codes within us and within humanity. You know, we're living in this exciting time, and we are entering a world of remembering that we are all one, that we originate from the Divine Mother's womb, and there is no separation. That's the biggest lie we've been told, and we've been told time and time and time again by patriarchy. And that is the reason why we see so much division on this planet, and why we see war, and why we see people hurting other people, because they don't see that they're hurting themselves when they're doing that. Like, who would hurt themselves? No one would inflict pain on themselves intentionally. And when we believe that we are separate from another, that is exactly what we do. We inflict pain on others, and we don't realize that every time we do that, we cause this deeper wound within ourselves, where we actually not only hurt ourselves, but we end up hating ourselves for the very thing that we project onto other people. All projections, all judgments are self-judgments. Let me say that again. All judgments are self-judgments. And when you judge others, when you hate on others, you are hating on yourself. You are judging yourself. Because we are all one. We all come from the same cosmic womb. And it's very hard for us to, like, I know maybe you're listening to this and you're like, okay, what does that even mean, that we are all one? It seems very real that we are separate. The ego loves to believe that we are separate and will give us evidence after evidence to prove that we are separate from another. But the 5D consciousness that we're moving towards is very much about unity consciousness. So the more that you can sit with that, I truly believe the better it will serve you moving forward into the new earth. Because like I said, if you're going against the grain, you're going to be swimming upstream when the energy is supporting this unity consciousness. So the more of that you can embrace, treat others how you would treat yourself, love, show compassion, forgive. This is so important when it comes to the Rose lineage and living from the heart. This path is all about the coherence of the heart and being an embodiment of our heart's truth. And the heart, when you connect with your heart, honestly, the frequency of your heart is so beautiful and divine. It just wants nothing but love and serenity and peace and harmony. It doesn't want conflict. It doesn't want to judge another. And the invitation is like, can we extend that outward to others? And more so to ourselves, because everything starts with self. So the path of the rose, a little bit about the history, and we don't know everything, right? Because so much of this is like new information, but we believe that it comes from Christ Sophia. So you may have heard of Christ Sophia. She is basically the feminine aspect of God, okay? So of Source. So she is the feminine embodiment of Christ energy. And so because everything in our reality is dual, when Source, the all universe, whatever you want to call it, divided itself into two, as into say a masculine and feminine part, and the feminine part is Sophia. There's a lot of things that have been written about her, but a lot of it has been kept out of the Bible, for example, out of Christian teachings. Jesus spoke a lot about Sophia actually, but a lot of the teachings where he spoke about Sophia, a lot of the times when he spoke about Sophia, that was not included in the Bible. Go figure. Sophia was there at the beginning of creation, and she essentially birthed the world into existence. And it makes sense because all of us come from our mothers, right? Like we all come from the womb of our mothers. And as above, so below. I always say that, as above, so below. Everything on a micro level is happening on a macro level. And so how did the world get created? It came through a woman. It didn't come from a man, as we've been told. It came from the woman, the womb, the cosmic womb, Sophia. And so Sophia is, in its translation, what it means is, it's a Greek word for God's wisdom. So Sophia is the Greek word for God's wisdom. And God's wisdom is a woman. So Sophia is our Divine Mother. The Divine Mother, you might have heard of that term Divine Mother before. And Divine Mother is often left out of religion, particularly like you think of the Holy Trinity in the church, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is actually the Divine Mother. It's the feminine aspect of God. And unfortunately, I won't get into why they associated the Divine Mother as the Holy Spirit. And what is the Holy Spirit? Like, is it a man? Is it a woman? We don't even know what the Holy Spirit is, right? Essentially, what it originally was the Divine Mother. So the Spirit is Sophia. And she is the divine feminine, or the third party of that Trinity. Okay, and it makes sense. When you start looking at this, it makes so much sense. Like, why have women, and I don't even want to get into this conversation, but why are women so often left out of religious concepts and teachings? It doesn't make sense, because in order for all of us to be here, we all came from our mothers. Like, you need masculine, feminine to birth a child into the world, right? So like, it just doesn't make sense what the church tried to do. Anyway, I won't get into that. The church really wanted to keep patriarchal control and remove the goddess from Christianity, essentially. So that's what happened, and it's still continued to this day, until now, as this information reemerges and people start remembering the truth. So essentially, this lineage is the path or the embodiment of the Great Mother, of the Divine Feminine, of Christ Sophia. So it's said that these teachings actually date back to the times of Lemuria and Atlantis, and then they were passed down throughout the ages, you know, to temple priestesses and priests at underground mystery schools in ancient Samaria and Egypt and the Middle East. And then eventually they came to Europe. And, you know, we've heard Mary Magdalene's story, how she came to France and she spread the teaching. So they ended up, you know, coming out in many different cultures through many different goddesses. And this is essentially what I'm trying to say, is this is like ancient stuff that we're talking about here. So for me, I've had that direct experience with Mary Magdalene when I went to France last year, and she's, I find, a very prominent figure in leading this movement at the moment. There are a lot of women working with Mary Magdalene who are being called to her lineage. Like, she's one of the many goddesses that are associated with the Rose lineage, but she's not the only one. So some of you may know that she was a priestess of Isis. So, you know, Isis is the Egyptian goddess with the big wings. She was also a manifestation embodiment of the divine feminine teachings of the Rose path. Other goddesses that you might have heard of that are a part of the Rose lineage and that were embodying these teachings was like Hathor, the Egyptian goddess, Kuan Yin, Inanna. There's Mother Mary, Green Tara, Saraswati, Joan of Arc, Aphrodite, Bridget, Lady Nada. There's so many, and all of them were walking the walk. They were an embodiment of the teachings. Like I said, the Rose lineage exists within us. It's a template within us, and we activate it by opening our hearts and walking the path of the feminine, walking the path of love, essentially, walking the path of the frequency of the heart, which is so powerful. Even Jesus was a part of the Rose lineage. So men can be a part of the Rose lineage as well. It's just amazing to think how many people from our past, how many ascended masters and goddesses did this work, and it's re-emerging at this time. There's like this collective remembering of this ancient wisdom, which is so exciting. And like I said, if you're still listening to this conversation, this is for you. You are a part of this lineage. But I guess the real thing that I really want to get across about the Rose lineage, and what I really want to like stress in this episode, and what was like is really coming through me to be spoken today, is it's not so much about where the Rose lineage originates from and which goddesses are associated with it. It's not really about that, but more about how we can be an embodiment of the Rose lineage. It's a path of, as I mentioned, embodiment, being in the body, like walking the walk, being in this world, remembering your divinity, but being in this world. It's not leaving the body, it's being in the body. We're seeing so much violence in the world at the moment. We're seeing so many things wrong with the world. We're seeing wars, environmental crisis. We see slavery of animals, of children. There's so much injustice in the world, and most of us, naturally, what we want to do is just close our hearts, because it hurts too much to feel all the pain, all the suffering that's occurring on planet Earth right now, right? You just feel like you want to, particularly most people that listen to my podcast and that come into my community are more sensitive souls, and you probably have the biggest hearts out of everyone. You feel everything, and so watching what's happening is so painful. You just want to shut down that heart. But the path of the rose is really to do the opposite of that. Like when you're seeing all this pain and injustice and hurt, even when someone hurts you, even if it's like a personal attack, can you keep your heart open? As much as it wants to close, can you keep your heart open? Because that is what the world truly needs right now. That is what the goddess wants. She wants us to open our hearts. Can you lead with more love, more grace, more understanding, more generosity, more compassion, and transcending the judgment? Every time you want to judge someone, flipping that around and looking at yourself and saying, how am I judging myself in this moment? What aspect of this person is triggering me, a part of myself that I have not made peace with. And then not judging yourself, but actually then extending love to yourself and self-compassion and self-love, and alchemizing that pain and that judgment into love, the highest frequency. That is the path of the rose. And it's not an easy path. It's probably what I believe the hardest path that there is. But if you're listening to this message, I truly believe this is the path that you have made a sacred agreement to come and embody in this lifetime. There are many of us doing this work right now. It's not just me, it's like many of us. We need to be working together because the feminine is all about collaboration. Our power is in numbers. And the more of us that open our hearts, just imagine how much that will ripple out at a wider level in our collective. You know, this is really a chance. We're in this time when we have the opportunity to embody more of the feminine characteristics. And I spoke about it in the first episode of this podcast, where I spoke about who is the goddess? And I spoke about the traits. So some of the traits are love, compassion, harmony, nurturing, oneness, unity, being in the flow, you know, being in the cyclical rhythms of life. It's peace, it's collaboration, it's being present in the moment, it's non-linear movement, it's chaotic at times, it's embodiment, it's being in the body, it's truth, it's justice, it's forgiveness, it's feeling our feelings. Feeling our feelings is huge. It's being sensitive. It's loving our body. It's loving our flaws, quote unquote, our flaws, you know, the things that we feel shame about, the things we don't like about ourselves, or the things we don't like about others. Can we bring love to that? Can we bring love to where love has not flowed before? It's acceptance. I don't know if I said that before, but it is acceptance. Just imagine what kind of world we would be living in right now if more of us were embodying those traits of the goddess, of goddess consciousness. Imagine what kind of world we would live in if that was the norm. This is the path of the rose. This is it. This is the path. And I said it in the beginning of this, we're going to heal the world with the feminine energy. And we do that by starting with self, by looking at ourselves. How can I embody more of these qualities? How can I bring them forward in my community, within myself, and then extend it out into the world? One thing I love looking at is the symbology of things, and the rose itself. So we speak of the rose lineage, but we can actually look at the rose as a flower as such an important symbol for this lineage and the teachings of the rose. The rose reminds us that we cannot force ourselves to ripen. You can't force a rose to grow, right? And we cannot will ourselves to be anything other than what we are in this present moment. And that is something so key to the feminine, because the feminine is very much about being present. It's about being real. It's about feeling our emotions. It's about being authentic. Who are we? And showing up from that space. And I really believe that that is one of the main teachings of the rose. It's that you can't force a rose to be anywhere but where it is in this present moment. And another teaching of the rose is, you know, it has to do with the boundaries that are enforced by the rose, by the stem. You know, the stem has thorns on it, right? You can't just pluck a rose from the garden. The rose, you know, can be admired from afar. It's beautiful, it's sensual, it's awe-inspiring, it's so beautiful to witness, right? But don't get too close. Don't pluck it from, you know, from the garden, because what happens? You might cut yourself, you might bleed, you might cut yourself on the thorns. So that is to say that while the feminine is soft, it's gentle, it's sensual, it's beautiful, it is love, it also has strong boundaries. It protects itself. So while your heart can be open, it can be fully bloomed, right? Like a rose. Remember that that rose has thorns. And that those thorns aren't attacking anyone. They're not going out and like throwing darts. But the thorns are there as an act of discernment. To say, I will open my heart, but I will not let anyone into my heart. It is through having thorns and through having strong boundaries that the rose is actually able to grow and to blossom into this beautiful, sovereign, majestic queen of a flower. And that is very much true of our feminine energy. And so we need to embody strong boundaries. If we're going to do this work, if we're going to be a beacon of light in the world that is exuding the energy of the heart, of this divine love, this frequency, we need to have strong boundaries. We need to be discerning on who has access to us, how much access they have to us. That is very important, very important. And to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves to others. Because in order for us to give, we need to first nurture ourselves. We need to fill up our own cups. We can't give from an empty tank. So I believe that is such a powerful teaching from the rose. There are so many secrets to explore there. And I mentioned before about how there's so many layers to it, so many layers to the feminine. There are so many petals. So we can just keep going in that spiral movement down and down into the feminine mysteries. And then we haven't even mentioned like the colors of roses. So you could get into all the colors of roses and that symbology. For example, like yellow roses, they represent like friendship and sisterhood and joy. You have the white rose, which is very symbolic of purity, holiness, and forgiveness, and compassion, and understanding, and also psychic powers and intuition and patience. And it could also be like a path to enlightenment. And then you have the red rose, of course, very, very I wanted to wear red today, but I ended up wearing a bright pink dress to try and be in flow with this conversation. But the red, you know, oh my gosh, there's so much there. The red represents passion, desire. It could be love, like romantic love. It could also be the womb and the menstrual blood, you know, the womb mysteries and the blood mysteries. Red is even in association with the heart and with the desire and the passion from the heart. You know, it's also like this deep, deep red, like this deep, being able to dive into the deep, to feel deep feelings, to almost go and descend into the darkness so that you can rise like a phoenix. And I also see it as like this energy of expression, being fully expressed, being fully in your power as a woman. And then you have the pink rose. The pink rose is a blend of the white and the red, you know, and I see it as this higher cosmic love. And it could also be self-love and nurturing, but also I see it as like the main pillar of Christ consciousness and this divine love of like peace, of unity consciousness and gratitude, and even very healing energy. I see the pink rose. And then you have the black rose, which, you know, black is often associated with like clearing, with shedding, with the dark night of the soul. So you could associate the black rose with letting go of things that are no longer serving and clearing out what needs to be cleared. Very Kali energy, you know, that death rebirth cycle, very Pluto, very Scorpio. And then you have the blue rose, which I don't know too much about, but what I believe is that the blue rose is very much associated with the earth. We think of earth as the blue planet because there's so much water here, and the blue rose is clearing just like the energies of the earth that need to be cleared as we move, as Gaia is shifting her consciousness. There needs to be a lot of work done to the grid lines of the planet. So that's what I believe the blue rose is associated with. And so, I mean, that's just like the tip of the iceberg. You could like deep dive into all of those different colors. There is so much, like I said, there's so many layers to this. Like I'm just like giving you a tiny little fraction of the Rose lineage to invite you to dive deeper into it. Go and explore it for yourself. Go and find your teachers, start working with different goddesses. And I guess that's what I want to talk about next. How can you work with the Rose lineage? I think from a more tangible place, yeah, you could, you know, start working with the energy of the rose. How about taking a bath and using rose petals or some sort of like rose oils, making rose tea, or like, you know, little tinctures with rose. You could go to a park or visit a garden and just gaze at a rose and just look at its beauty. You could plant your own roses if you have a garden. You could plant your own roses. You know, I love giving offerings of my menstrual blood to the earth. Something I've done before is offered my menstrual blood as an offering to the rose. You could even do a meditation and just connect to roses through meditating. So there's many ways that you can go about doing this. Remember, I think the last thing I want to leave everyone with is that every single thing that you do, every word you say, everything you feel, everything you don't feel, everything you don't express, everything that you don't say has an impact on the world. Everything is affecting the collective consciousness and essentially the world at large. As above, so below, as I've said many times throughout this episode. So don't think that you're just here as some innocent bystander, that you can't help what's going on in the world. You can very much do so by just opening your heart, as we've spoken about today. You don't understand how much that alone, by you just working on yourself and being an embodiment of these teachings, of the rose teachings, of the teachings of the heart, the path of the heart, the path of the rose, you don't understand how much that can transcend this world. And we are all contributing regardless if we are conscious of it or not. So for those of you listening, I assume that you are someone who is conscious. This is an invitation for you to choose love, to choose the path of the goddess, and to be an embodiment of the goddess and goddess consciousness on this earth at this time, in every present moment, in every day, in all your interactions. You know, start your morning by asking, how can I love more? How can I be love today? How can I emanate that frequency into the world? And I think if you start your day every morning by just asking those questions, how can I emanate more love in this world? I think that's the best way to start on this path of the rose, this path of the goddess, of the divine feminine. I think that is the exact place to start, and you will receive the guidance that you need. You are doing so much for this planet, more than you even know. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. You know, it's such a big topic, and I hope I did it justice to some extent. I know that, you know, there's just so much more to unravel, and maybe we can talk about this more in future episodes, but I hope it gives you a little glimpse into what is the Rose Lineage, and I guess what are we talking about when we talk about the Rose teachings and the Rose codes and all of these things. I think we hear a lot of these terms getting thrown around, and I think really it's not about, we don't have to get into all the metaphysics of everything. I think it's really just about coming back to the simplicity of it, and the way that I see it, a way of the heart. It's really about opening the heart. That's what I believe. And as I mentioned, if you're asking those questions each morning, how can I emanate more love? I think you're on the path. So that's all I wanted to share. If you love this podcast, then please leave us a review or a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps us out so much. And yeah, I mentioned in the beginning that this will be the final episode of season 1, so I won't be back next week, but I will be back soon with more episodes for you. I can't wait to see you then.